heavy,
bored.
The other thing I'll talk about, and of course, this has to do with something that they would call the creative writing industry. Because of the instructor, there are certain types of workshops. So I've heard about this from friends who were in PhD level workshops, PhD level creative writing workshops. And what happens is the instructor is so lazy and doesn't want to do their job, so they have everybody come in and do cold reads. So you are not giving the poems ahead of time. And I don't know if this is happening in fiction workshops. Maybe a listener could write in and let me know if this is happening in fiction workshops, where you're not giving the work at least a week ahead of time to get the readings in and give it a couple reads, go over it, try to be fair, try to help this person grow, try to help them make their work better. What a lot of lazy professors have chosen to do with poetry is to not do that at all, which means that we're not having a workshop, that they're not having an actual discussion. They are just, I guess, getting paid to show up to a room for a couple hours a week. And that's a disgrace, absolutely disgraceful. If you're a professor and you run your workshops this way, you shouldn't be a professor. You should lose your job. Because you're not running a workshop. And I actually had a friend who's told me at a couple different institutions, I've had friends tell me about this style of workshop. I find it absolutely appalling. If you're coming in with nobody having read the poems prior to the day of workshop, and not only because they're bad students, that's not why they didn't read the poem, it's because that's what the instructor wants them to do. And instructors that do this lazy kind of workshop routine, what they claim is that they're giving it a read that people would in a magazine. Nobody's going to read your poem more than once. Nobody's going to read your story more than once, so it only matters for that one read. And of course, that is completely fabricated. That's not what workshops are for. Workshops are for honing the craft, understanding the mistakes, pointing out the mistakes. It isn't for people to read in a fucking literary magazine one time and set it aside, okay? That is the after effect. That comes after the workshop process. But of course, these instructors all have tenure. Of course, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say what universities they were from, but they were prestigious, huge R1 research institutions in the States, okay, that they're in. And the staff is literally a joke, just absolutely insane. So that's another issue in workshops, right? Just complete disregard for the time it takes to write something like this. It's built into the course that people do not give you the time of day. And it's so appalling. It's so appalling that these people call themselves creative writing instructors. They're just lazy. They've lost it. They're just enjoying tenure at this point, or that's what they were taught to do because it's baked into the pedagogy, right? And nobody cares. Nobody does anything. Nobody faces any consequences. I've said this before in a few episodes that keep in mind, workshops have their place. I don't want to just be like shitting on workshops, especially if we're doing a series like this. I don't want to just be shitting on them. What I want is them to be better. There's a place for them. There's a place for young amateur writers to come in and have experts, which usually the only expert in the room is the instructor, by the way. To go back to my first point, there is a way that workshops are designed to help people. They want to help young writers. They want to show you the different techniques. They want to help you work through them, learn the craft. There is a place for writing workshops. But when we start getting to these very advanced levels, the MFA and PhD level, and we're still having these petty internet discussions occupy most of the time in the workshop, I just think that it's a failure of the instructor. And there's nobody else to blame it on. You could blame it on these large systemic things. You could blame it on whatever you want, but really it's down to the authority figure in the room. And if the authority figure in the room is not taking that responsibility and using it carefully, if they're using it in a political way, that's a problem. But if they're using it to play favorites, that's usually another problem that happens in workshops, right? If they're using that authority to diminish the experience, like, for example, having cold reads on workshops, it's just not going to work. And when the listener wrote in and said,
Inner.
Resources, American resources. shows such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.